A member of the fake news media, it's always a pleasure to be welcomed so warmly anywhere I go. And I did want to mention, by the way, that you are welcome to stay seated throughout this, or stand up, or take a knee, or whatever you choose to do. It's completely up to you. Nobody's going to be fired or suspended tonight. So thank you very much. Thank you to that one person who clapped. I appreciate that very much. It's also very nice to be here because it's not that warm in here this evening. I actually just a few hours ago was at Rideau Hall interviewing the Governor General, David Johnston, and it turns out that's actually going to be his last interview with the media as Governor General, and it's going to be on my show tomorrow morning, so a little plug for that. But Rideau Hall does not have central air conditioning, so it was, and I was, I'm going to interview the Governor General. I'm not going to wear a t-shirt and shorts, so I was wearing a suit, and it was very warm. But it was not as warm as a previous time that I had been at Rideau Hall when I was interviewing Adrienne Clarkson, and that was on a day when it was even more humid than today. And I brought my tape recorder and my microphone, and I had to sit right next to her because, of course, I'm holding the microphone in my hand and passing it back and forth underneath her face and mine as I asked her questions, and she responded. And they turned off all of the fans and the air conditioning so there would be no noise. And it was hot. And right before we started the interview, her assistant closed the door in the room so that there was no sound from the hallway coming in. And as soon as he did, the temperature went up like 3 or 4 degrees, or at least that's what it felt like to me. So by midway through the interview, I basically looked like a hockey player being interviewed during the first intermission of Hockey Night in Canada. I was dripping and dripping with sweat, and Madam Clarkson was very gracious about the whole thing, and we completed the interview, and then they offered me a towel. So that fortunately it didn't get that bad today. So listen, it's a great pleasure to be here, especially on opening day, and I just got a very quick tour of the facility here, which is absolutely remarkable, and so I'm so impressed with the work that's been done here by staff and volunteers, and I think this is going to be such an important facility in our community, and is going to provide so much warmth and comfort to so many families in our city in the years ahead. So congratulations to everyone on a job well done. Now, I want to ask you today to imagine for a moment that you had an opportunity to do something today that somebody else might remember 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 13 years from now. Wouldn't that be significant? Wouldn't it be nice to think you could do something today that people would still be thinking about and talking about, say, 13 years from now? Now, what if that thing was something that was so meaningful that the person who was talking about it 13 years from now would actually get a little bit emotional about it, would want to embrace you, would want to thank you, might even be moved to tears when talking about it? Wouldn't that be pretty special for you? What would it take, do you think, to create that kind of moment? You're probably thinking you'd have to do something really significant, maybe you'd have to have a really important job. Maybe you'd have to be a surgeon or a firefighter, somebody who saved someone's life, or you'd have to simply have been in the right place at the right time, that you would have had to have pulled somebody from a burning car or something like that, or maybe helped them deliver a baby in the back seat of a taxi. You're probably thinking that whatever it was that you might have done, that it'd be something you would remember too, right? That it would be that significant. Obviously, you'd remember this moment as well. But what if the person standing before you was telling you about something that you did and you didn't really remember any of it? The circumstances, of course, sounded right. It's not like they have you mistaken with somebody else or something like that. You just don't remember that specific moment. In fact, it sounds like something you did on a regular basis. Nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary, but something that had a profound impact on somebody else. It was routine for you, but it had such an impact on the other person that he still remembers it 13 years later. Think about that for a second, how significant that would be. Well, that opportunity is available to all of us as volunteers. I've seen it over and over again in my own career. People who made a difference in the lives of children, in the lives of the hungry, in the lives of people in distress. I've seen it dozens of times, probably hundreds of times, right here in this community. People offering help and support when others needed it most. I'm willing to bet that's true for many of the volunteers who are in the room tonight, for the people who volunteer for Hospice Care Ottawa. They've had exactly that impact. And in fact, I know it's the case. I've been using the number 13 years, which is kind of an unusual number. Why am I sort of using an example of 13 years? Well, 13 years ago this week, on September 29th, 2004, my father passed away at the May Court Hospice. He was there only a couple of weeks, and yet those are some of the most vivid and meaningful memories of my life. I remember more of those 2 or 3 weeks than I do of many of our family vacations or other moments in my life. I can remember my father sitting in the garden by the water at the May Court. I can remember him enjoying some of the food that some of the volunteers prepared for him. I can remember him welcoming some of his oldest friends who dropped by to visit. By the way, as an aside, my father moved to Ottawa from the United Kingdom when he was 19 years old, and within a few days he found lodging with a family. He signed up for room and board with a family on Ossington Avenue in the south end of the city. And then, almost 50 years later, he was welcomed at the May Court just 1 block away. Hubert Humphrey said, "The moral test of a society is how that society treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadow of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped." I could probably insert a comment here about the healthcare debate going on in the United States, but I'll save that sort of thing for my talk show. But the volunteers at Hospice Care Ottawa have passed that moral test with flying colors. My father was treated with loving care by the staff and the volunteers at the May Court. My whole family was. It's something for which I am still grateful today. So thank you. Thank you very much. So what I've just described is the opportunity that comes with volunteering, an opportunity that's available to all of us. I would argue that doing something for no pay at all is one of the most lucrative opportunities that we have in our lives. Most of us will run out of time before we run out of money, so our time is actually our most precious commodity. When we share that time, we're giving the greatest and most valuable gift that we have to offer. Now, I've said many times that I won the lottery the day that I was born, that I've continued to be incredibly lucky throughout my life ever since. Unlike my parents, I was born in Ottawa, in one of the safest and most comfortable cities in one of the most prosperous countries in the world. What an extraordinary head start that is in life. Sometimes people play that game of, would you want to go through it all again? Would you want to start over, start your life as a child in this time, go through all those painful high school years? I have a teenage stepdaughter, so I've been witnessing all of the drama associated with that in the last couple of years. Well, one statistic to keep in mind is that the odds of you getting a life as good as the one you have now are probably not very high. I know in my case, it would be a long shot for me to go through this again and get the same opportunities I've had this time around. For example, just as one example, you'd have about a 1 in 340 chance of being born in Canada if you were born in this world tomorrow. Not only was I born in a wonderful place, Ottawa, Canada, I was born to two loving parents, so that gave me a huge advantage as well. I was also lucky to be born in this time, in the second half of the 20th century. What incredible good fortune that is. Would you trade your life today with the richest person alive in the 18th century? I know I wouldn't. About 8 years ago, I had appendicitis, which means if I'd been born any time except in the last 100 years, I'd be dead right now. So it's not a throwaway line, it's not a bromide or a platitude to say that I believe I am one of the luckiest people who has ever been born. Most of us in this room are in that category as well. In a way, we are the 1%ers. Some people might assume then that I view volunteering as a means of repaying my debt, sharing my good fortune, compensating for my luck by helping those who have been less fortunate. But that is not the case at all. To me, community service is an opportunity. It's not an obligation. I could try to portray volunteering as a sacrifice that I'm willing to make for my community, some difficult, painful slog that I endure because I'm a wonderful person, I'm altruistic, I'm generous, I'm selfless. But it wouldn't be remotely true. The experiences that I've had as a volunteer have been among the most enjoyable, satisfying, and fulfilling of my life. Indeed, I've had many job titles. You heard a few of them in my intro. I've been a CEO, a television and radio host, a newspaper publisher and editor, a journalist and columnist, a consultant. But the title of which I am proudest is volunteer. I usually include that in my bio when I'm asked for it because I want to emphasize that I consider it to be an important part of what I do, and I hope perhaps that in some small way I'll inspire others to share their experiences or to take on more volunteer opportunities themselves. Interestingly, my media career started with volunteering. When I was in high school, I started to work for free as a volunteer at Carleton University's radio station, CKCU, and then at what is now Rogers Cable TV. At the time it was called Ottawa Cable. And without those opportunities, I would not have had the career that I've had today. And over the last 25 years, I've been involved in many community activities and worked with hundreds of volunteers for organizations like United Way Ottawa, the Ottawa Community Housing Foundation, the Ottawa Hospital, Ottawa Race Weekend, the Great Canadian Theatre Company, and many other community organizations. I'm always impressed and inspired by the extent to which so much of the terrific work that these organizations do is carried out by volunteers, some of whom have been doing it for years and years and years. I understand that the work done by volunteers at Hospice Care Ottawa adds up to something like 54,000 hours a year, the equivalent of 27 or 28 full-time employees. That is an astonishing number, and it speaks very strongly to the strength and support of the community behind your mission. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Some of us may feel that what we do is small, that it's only a tiny little contribution, that if we weren't there to do it, someone else would pick up the slack, or it wouldn't be a big difference one way or the other. But as Mother Teresa said, we ourselves feel that what we are doing is just a drop in the ocean. But the ocean would be less because of that missing drop. And in fact, we need volunteers now more than ever. As you all know, the government and the role that government plays in our lives has changed dramatically in recent years. Resources are tight and limited. The government can't do as much as it used to. So the public sector is facing all of these rising costs and financial pressures and can't do as much anymore. But why would we want a world without volunteers. Why would we want to take that out of the equation? We need more than ever the shared experience, the things that bring people together with the best of intentions. There is no greater experience available to a human being than to be united with others around a common, unselfish purpose. It's a great privilege to be involved in something meaningful, to contribute to a worthwhile cause. We all dream of working with thoughtful and creative people on something successful, our own version of playing for a winning team. What better experience could there be then than to be part of a group that builds a house, to be part of a group that starts a homework club, or that chips away at homelessness, at poverty, at hunger. In some cases, the opportunity to make a difference is thrust upon us. The heroic rescue workers in earthquake and hurricane zones, for example, the firefighters in Fort McMurray last year. They performed admirably and relentlessly under extraordinary conditions, and they truly are heroes. Helen Steiner Rice said, "In this troubled world, it's refreshing to find someone who still has the time to be kind, someone who still has the faith to believe that the more you give, the more you receive, someone who's ready by thought, word, or deed to reach out a hand in the hour of need." The people who respond in these times of catastrophe are truly heroes. But without the crisis, without the forest fire, without the hurricane, they might not have had the chance to shine so brilliantly. A wonderful aspect of the kind of day-to-day volunteering that all of you are involved in is that you need not wait for the moment to choose you. All you have to do is put up your hand. As Martin Luther King said, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. And as Homer Simpson once said, yes, I'm quoting Homer Simpson right after quoting Martin Luther King. As he once said about television, volunteering gives so much and asks so little. You get to step away from your primary roles and focus on something different. You tap into some of your skills, maybe even some talents that are underutilized. You see a different side of your city. You gain a bit of perspective about what's really important, and you learn not to be so obsessed with your own first world problems. You see a different side of the world. You see a different side of yourself. You see a different side of other people. When you work for free with others who have chosen to do the same, it creates a dynamic much different from the workplace. There's a lot less grumbling about the obstacles, much less expectation that someone else will solve the problem for you, significantly less concern over whether other individuals are doing their fair share. For the most part, everyone checks their egos at the door, rolls up their sleeves, and gets the job done. Life is better when you see people at their best. Volunteers are often portrayed in heroic terms because they contribute their time in return for nothing, but the rewards of volunteering are worth much more than money, and they far exceed the modest amount of effort that you have to put into it. At least that's been my experience. For me, it's a great bargain. In fact, it's probably the most significant return on any investment that I've made in my life. What a privilege it is to be asked to help and to be able to say yes. I would also say that the real heroes are the people who work every day in community service roles, the full-time staff at organizations like Hospice Care Ottawa. They do the heavy lifting. They make most of the tough decisions. Working full-time for a nonprofit organization usually involves a much greater sacrifice than putting in a few hours here and there, like I've done over the last few years. If the best things in life are free, then the best roles in life are when you work for free. As much as I'd like to think that volunteering proves that I'm a decent person, I could justify it all on selfish reasons alone. Like many people, I want to leave the world a better place for my children, and I hope that they will strive to do the same for theirs. If there's any lesson I would share with my kids about community service, it's not that they should view it as their duty or responsibility. As J.C. Penney said, how can we expect our children to know and experience the joy of giving unless we teach them that the greater pleasure in life lies in the act of giving rather than receiving? There is simply no greater satisfaction than feeling like you have made a difference. In fact, I'm not sure what else there is to life other than that. I'm proud to call myself a volunteer. All of you should be very proud to do so as well. Thank you for being those meaningful drops in the ocean, over and over again. Thank you for being those thoughtful, committed citizens. Thank you for having hearts full of grace. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for being volunteers. Thank you, everyone.